It's funny that you mentioned having those folder issues because I made a folder on my laptop to keep the podcast stuff in, and I was naming the folder and I named it Podcat.
Are we going to have to rename the podcast now?
We might have to rename it, but yeah, I'm just like it's Podcat now.
How's it going, Brick Road?
Oh, it's going pretty good. We made lasagna for dinner, and I ate way too much of that.
Good. Good. That's the way to be. I had Witch Witch for dinner. Have you ever had a Witch Witch before?
Now, I'm gonna see if I get this right. Is a witch a sandwich made by a witch?
They are magical, but no, it's Witch Witch as in it's WHICH. WICH as in which do you want to eat? Put in your face. It's kind of like, okay, so imagine a Subway, except instead of talking to a person, you take a little piece of paper and you just put check marks on everything that you want in your sandwich and hand it to someone. Well, they're little paper bags. And then they put the sandwich, the finished sandwich, they wrap it up in foil and then stick it back in the bag. So you get your bag back with all your little check marks on it. It's delightful because you can put check marks all over this thing. You can get all kinds of crazy combinations of food. And you don't have that annoying, what is that? Is that banana peppers? Yeah, put some of those on there. And just sitting there and watching the guy build your sandwich as you meander your way through the little glass line.
It's interesting you bring up banana peppers as an example of something that you like dwell on like that. Because, I mean, I go to the Wawa, which is not as sophisticated as the Witch from what it sounds, but it has an equally ridiculous name. And I order my sandwich on the touch screen. Okay, so I'll touch, yes, I want banana peppers. I know what those are. It's a picture of banana peppers on the screen. And then they'll put sweet peppers or jalapeno peppers on the sandwich instead.
Ooh, see, that's a bummer. I haven't had anything come out wrong from the Witch that I've noticed. To be honest, by the time I get my Witch, it's almost always like 90% of the meat's available and like 80% of the vegetables available and like 3 or 4 sauces. So I wouldn't really notice if something was slightly off.
Do they have a little check mark on the Witch bag for just like loaded up like everything in the restaurant?
They don't have a thing for all the toppings. I think you might be able to just draw a line through the toppings, and I'm sure that would get the job done. But they do have the sandwich I usually go for is called the Wicked. Maybe this place originated in Boston or something. I don't know, but their signature sandwich is called the Wicked, and it's like the basically all the meat sandwich.
So it's the Wicked Witch.
Yes. Oh, you know what's sad? I hadn't actually put that together at this exact moment. I always just thought of it as like, oh yeah, it's like maybe they're from Boston. It's wicked, man.
I used to work at a Hungry Howie's way back in the day. First job I had as a teenager, and you'd get people to call up, and we had a pizza called the Works, which like pepperoni, sausage, all those typical pizza toppings.
Like a Supreme, basically.
Yeah, exactly. But none of like the other stuff like we had in the restaurant. Like we had lettuce and tomatoes and stuff for salads. We would not put that on your Works. We had a separate pizza set aside. It wasn't on the menu. You had to call and tell us you want everything and then enunciate, I mean everything. And on the little ticket, instead of the Works, we'd write everything. And that meant everything. You wanted lettuce, you wanted tomato, you wanted 3 kinds of olives, you wanted the bacon, you wanted the taco meat for the taco pizza. You wanted everything. And it was the most disgusting pizza.
I gotta be honest. Nothing of that sounds bad except for the lettuce. There's no reason lettuce should ever be anywhere near a pizza. That's just wrong. It's just watery filler.
It doesn't come out crunchy. You put it through... Have you ever seen like a modern pizza oven? With like the conveyor belt?
Oh yeah, no, I've seen all kinds of pizza ovens. I'm a big fan of the old school like brick pizza oven.
You would watch this pizza come through and you'd like see the lettuce wilting in real time. It's like somebody's enjoying that.
That just reminds me of when you go to the place and you get like, a sandwich or something with shredded lettuce on it and you eat half of it and put it in the fridge and forget that there's lettuce on it, and the next day you just got this like soggy piece of bread and these limp pieces of leaves. Ugh.
Or if I go to like Chipotle and I want lettuce on my Chipotle burrito bowl, But most of the components of that burrito bowl, because I can't finish the whole thing in one sitting, I got to heat it up later. And then that's when I've got to really make the decision. Like, what do I do with the leftover lettuce on the burrito bowl?
See, now for me, a burrito, anything that's got lettuce on it has to be a one-sitting meal. There's no way I'm going back to anything that has lettuce on it. Like, I have to scoop the lettuce out before I put it in the fridge.
I feel like you have a pretty good track record there. Every time I've been to Atlanta and you're like, hey, we'll go to this place and get food. So I would trust you on the which.
As someone who appreciates a good sandwich, particularly, I think you would be a fan of the which. I'll have to take you to one next time you're in Atlanta. The problem is there's not one near my house. There's one near my work. And there was one near my old house, which I'm surprised we never went there when you came up for Dragon Con. But there's not one near my current house, so I'm not really sure when we'll encounter a which again, unless you are by my work for some reason, which seems unlikely.
Like, one of my favorite sandwich places in town is the Earl of Sandwich. And we have one here, but it's like 20 minutes away. And when you live in suburbia like I do, 20 minutes is literally the other side of the moon. I have to pass every restaurant imaginable to get to the Earl of Sandwich.
Yeah, I can't imagine passing like several shops to get to a sandwich shop. Like, I will go out of my way for like something special, but for a sandwich shop, that's kind of a big ask.
There's got to be a formula to this. Maybe we can develop like a mathematical, like, I'll drive past 5 Subways to get to a Jimmy John, and I'll pass 2 Jimmy Johns to get to a Wawa. Like, does that make any sense?
No, I feel you. Like, I wouldn't piss on a Subway to put it out if it was on fire. So there's no end to the amount of Subways I would pass to get to even, say, a Wendy's. But I don't know how many. I would pass maybe 5 Wendy's to get to a decent burrito place.
We'll have to write a book.
The calculus of fast food.
Did I ever tell you how, like, my last interaction with Subway, what I decided is the end of our relationship? Subway and I have broken up for good now.
You probably have, but lay it on me again.
I live next to the worst Subway in existence. It's the worst Subway I've ever been to. And I've eaten at those tiny Subways, like, attached to a dirty truck stop off the interstate. This is worse than that. The girl makes my sandwich, and I get it home, and the bacon on the sandwich is not cooked. It's warm, but it's pink and it's runny. I took a picture and I tweeted it out, and I'm like, I'm breaking up with Subway. And then Subway's Twitter comes back with, wow, DM us so we can make it right. So I DM'd them and I said, can you hook me up with a Wawa gift card? And I never heard from them again.
That's pretty good. I don't think I had Twitter when I broke up with Dairy Queen. I made the mistake of getting a burger from Dairy Queen one time, which I think may have actually given me food poisoning. It was the worst hamburger I've ever had in my life. It was supposed to be this spicy thing, this, like, I don't know, let's just say it was called a Diablo. I forget what the branding was. It was like a burger with, some sort of chipotle mayonnaise and pepper jack cheese and whatever. I bit into this thing, and I'm not exaggerating when I say it tasted like a lukewarm dish sponge.
Oh,
it was
no.
the most revolting piece of meat I've ever put in my mouth. And I know my first mistake was going and getting meat from a place called Dairy Queen, but I've had their hot food before. That's like half their menu. It's usually not this bad, but this was the worst burger I've ever had, and I can only imagine the Twitter I would have written if I had it at the time.
If only.
Yeah, I love brand interaction on Twitter. I liked, oh God, who got hacked? Somebody got hacked in the past week.
Buffalo Wild Wings got hacked.
That's right.
Their Twitter account. And I tried to find the tweets that got sent out, and I couldn't find them.
You wouldn't want to read them anyhow. They're definitely not PG. They used like the N word and I think the F word. Both F words, I think.
There's 2?
Yes, there's
Okay.
the big F word and there's the slur for homosexuals F words. I'm using it in both contexts here. At any rate, it used a lot of bad words. The F word, the N word, the C word. And at one point, they called out Wendy's. And Wendy's has a reputation for being kind of snippy on social media. That's like they got one of those cool, hip social media things. And I'm almost upset that the Wendy's social media person showed restraint and didn't fire something off at the hacked Buffalo Wild Wings account, because that would have been beautiful.
What I always like is when I go into the Buffalo Wild Wings. It's like we never eat there, but we have one right down the road. Especially on Sunday nights. We both spent the whole day working. We're tired. Nobody wants to cook. The kitchen's a wreck anyway. We'll just order food at Wild Wings. We'll just go pick it up, bring it home. So we got to stand by their little checkout counter. And the only thing there is to do is look at their leaderboards for their bar quiz nationwide scores.
Yep.
And
I've seen that.
It's always funny because it's very clear that some towns have Buffalo Wild Wings that are very intensely occupied with getting high scores, and there's some towns, mine included, that could not care less.
It's a weird thing watching the video trivia where you can actually get the little keypad. They might give you a tablet now, I don't know, but they used to give you like these little like keypads or whatever, and you could log in and you could sit at the bar and play little TV trivia. And I assume that's what you're talking about. The Buffalo Wild Wings still does this thing.
Mm-hmm.
We used to play trivia at this bar, and there was this one guy, and I can't remember what his name was. It was something amazing. Samurai Cat or something to that effect. Like, it was some amazing thing. And it took us a while to figure out that this trivia team that was beating us was one guy. And he would play team. They would do the team trivia where they do like, oh, it's team trivia. We're going to ask you a question and play a song. And you write your answer on a little slip of paper. That kind of team trivia, right? We figured out that this guy who beat the bar at team trivia every week not only did that, he was also playing the little bar TV trivia at the same time and had that high score.
Was this man just a walking Wikipedia?
I never spoke to him, but something told me that since he was at the bar playing team trivia by himself, he might have been like, I don't know, like a Rain Man case or something. Like, I mean, he was obviously a genius, but I kind of got the impression maybe he didn't have social graces.
My mom is going to be very appreciative that we opened this podcast with something other than video games.
Oh, is Mom listening? Hi, Mom.
She is. She's never listened to a podcast before. It took us a little while to figure out where her button was on her iPhone, but she got it set up. She sent me a text message. Let me pull it up here. After she listened to it. She sent me a bunch of text messages. Like, my mom is not completely... She's not a Luddite. Like, she's a little bit tech savvy, but she sends, like, 8 text messages in a row. Like, has the whole conversation all at once.
Yeah.
So she correctly identified the baby who I left laying in a soiled diaper. So I don't know if it'll ever show up on a team trivia at a bar, but my mom's got that, okay? She commented that I should have mentioned Sesame Street, because that was my addiction when I was 4 years old.
Right. Well, I mean, that was everyone's at that time. We didn't have as many options.
And then eventually she said she enjoyed it, even though she had no idea what we were talking about when we were talking about video games.
That's very sweet. My parents are I think, more tech savvy. They're very plugged in for their generation, and that makes it somehow less likely that I'm going to tell them that I have a podcast. I mean, I tweeted about it, so they probably could tell, but I'm 90% sure my dad sees all of my video game related tweets and I'm going to stream this thing, or I posted this thing on YouTube, and it just rolls his eyes and goes and plays Words with Friends some more.
Well, when we were kids, me and my brother growing up, we were both gifted in different ways. My brother was very visual. He was able to like draw pictures and things. I was always more about writing. Like, I would always write things. And so what would happen is, and this happened all the time through my entire childhood, is my brother would go up with some picture he drew, and they'd look at it and appreciate it and be like, oh, this is excellent. And then, like, I'd show up with, like, this 40-page thing that I wrote, and they'd go, oh, well, I don't have time to read it, but I'm sure it's really good.
I think my parents were probably very grateful that I was mostly protective of my terrible poetry I wrote in high school. Occasionally I would get something, like I got some stuff in the Lit Mag, and I like won like a contest, or one of those contests where like half the school goes to the next level or something, nothing too big. But for the most part, I kept my writings to myself. My problem as an artistic child was I couldn't focus on anything. So I did a little bit of writing, I did a little bit of music, and I think the thing I tortured them most with was theater. They had to come to quite a few high school theater shows, so God bless them for that, for putting up with my my screaming on stage as Eilert Lovborg in Hedda Gabler. God bless them.
Is there any chance of us getting a hold of some of your high school poetry?
Maybe. You know what we should do? Let's actually see if we have an audience before I scare them all off. Because my high school poetry was really bad. Get me really good and drunk one night and put a mic in front of me, and maybe I'll read you some. Because I will tell you, you could get a hold of it because every bit of it is still on my PC because I am a digital pack rat and I don't get rid of anything. So all those files are still sitting in a folder just as they were from 1996 or whatever.
I mean, I went through a poetry phase too, but like my favorite poet is Shel Silverstein. So
yeah,
all of my stuff was like in that vein. It's all just like silly and goofy and it like barely rhymes because I was a young kid. And I got all the poetry out of my system before it ever turned dark and embarrassing.
So I actually have one poem that I do refer to as my "Where the Sidewalk Ends" poem because I did write one lengthy rhyming poem that I actually think was pretty good. If you give me, God, should I share it? Believe it or not, of all the brooding, arrhythmic, free verse crap that I wrote about girls I had crushes on, I wrote one rhyming poem that actually, okay, you know what, screw it. Here it comes. I actually remember this one. It's called Fly. And remember, I wrote this when I was 16. I just liked the rhyme scheme. There was a fly sat on a pie and ate contentedly. There was a guy just passing by who saw the pie and said, my, I think I'd like a piece. He took a sigh, I know not why he used a sigh, and cut the pie. But on his pie he saw a fly, and he yelled, aye! And took his sigh and stabbed the fly in the eye, and now the fly was blind. But blind was the fly on the pie of the guy just passing by. Don't worry, we're almost done. He flew away, knew not the way, and to this day he stays away from pies and guys at pointed size. So when a fly flies in your eye, you wonder why I do not lie. The reason why is because the fly cannot always see.
Bravo. That was excellent.
That is one. I mean, I have it memorized because it is the only poem I ever wrote that I actually said, you know what, that's actually pretty good. If I could write 50 more like that, I would have a book. I would be making money, but that was the only one I ever crapped out.
You could turn that into a Perry Grip song.
Oh man, I have some that I tried to set to music, and they're probably the worst.
I don't have any of those works in a digital format because I mean we're going the internet. Al Gore hadn't invented it yet.
Right.
But when I was like in high school and stuff, I wrote a lot of fan fiction, and all of that is still on the internet to this day. Like, I'm not embarrassed by it. I think it's funny when people bring it up. I tell people where they can go and find it. Like, some of it's in, like, the RP Gamer archives or whatever.
Did you use a nom de plume, or is it all under your Christian name?
No, I mean, I've literally used the handle Brick Road since 1995. So, like, it's all under that same name.
Yeah, using the handle McClain means that there's so much stuff that I can pretty much just casually ignore half of it and be like, no, that's some other McClain. What are you talking about?
So you have one of those the NES classics, do you not?
I do not. I have the SNES Classic. I was going to get an NES Classic when they're reissued later this month.
But you, like, obviously, since you're planning on buying the other one when it comes back out, like, you think these things they offer a pretty good value for what you pay for.
Well, I mean, there's a kitsch factor to it for sure. I think the thing that I like the most about it is these controllers just feel so good. Like, I am 90% sure Nintendo still had the molds for the old controllers sitting in a closet somewhere and just brought them back out. Because these controllers feel so good in your hand, and something about having this little solid piece of plastic, the little switches for the power and the reset feel exactly the same, just shrunk down. Pushing the little purple plastic, thing up to turn it on is so satisfying. And I can play any of these games 1,000 different ways, like on my computer or my old Wii, but they look great. They have very little to no input delay on an HD TV, which, I mean, we talked about CRT televisions last week. Like, that's one of the worst things about trying to play old media. And I think it's just a cool little piece of kit. And, if I ever felt like it, I could hack the thing and put a bunch more on it. And a lot of people do, but I just haven't so far.
Is it authentic enough where, like, after a time, the bottom half of the plastic will become discolored?
I don't know, to be completely honest, because I have an original SNES, and it is definitely like that two-tone, the original purple and like this weird yellowish color that people always try to say, oh, it's because of smoking. No one ever smoked inside my house. That's just what that plastic did.
So how much was the SNES Mini? Like, I actually don't know. I'm going to guess in the vicinity of like $150.
No, they're much cheaper.
Much cheaper.
The SNES, I think the SNES was 70, and I think the NES is 60. I think the SNES was a little more expensive because it came with 2 controllers, whereas the SNES came with I think the SNES comes with 2, and the NES only came with 1 because the SNES has a lot more 2-player games.
And then, but it's got like the Mario, the Zelda, Final Fantasy on there.
Yeah,
all the classics. I'm gonna send you a link to a new device coming out next year that's in this similar vein.
Mm-hmm.
And don't read the article; just look at the picture that pops up. And first of all, just like tell me whether or not this is something you'd be interested in buying. And then after we've had that discussion, I would like you to scroll down and look at the price.
Oh God. You know, I've heard a little bit about this, but not enough to know what the price is, because I've seen that the pre-orders and stuff are up.
So what are we looking at, first of all? What is this machine?
It's a new retro Atari. And it looks like, does it come with both? Does it come with a stick controller and this new, it looks like basically your standard 2-stick controller.
Yeah, it's got like a nice little circle pad on it. It also does come with the authentic just joystick, single button joystick.
Yeah, I mean, it looks like basically a recolored Xbox controller, a slightly different style, but it's pretty nice looking little controller. You know, hoping that the sticks feel good, but I would hope they would.
And you would have to think that a system like this would come with a lot of the classic Atari games.
I mean, you could probably fit, I mean, realistically, the entire, licensing aside, you could fit basically the entire Atari library on, what, a thumb drive now? I mean...
I know that the popular Atari 2600 emulators that you can download literally just come with all the ROMs.
Why wouldn't they? And so many of those things, I mean, who knows who even has the rights to them anymore? Is it even stealing at that point? You know? Hold on, quick casual aside, when do video games enter the public domain?
I would assume, isn't it 70 years past the life of the, I would assume, publisher?
I don't know. I don't know
either.
I'll have to look into that. Maybe that'd be something I look up for next week.
We have to ask Mickey Mouse. He's the authority on these matters.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing is okay, I'm not scrolling down. I'm following the rules. Can you tell me, because there was some speculation, is this just a retro console, or is this also to play newer games? Because I thought that there was some confusion when it was pitched, whether this was just a retro console, or if it's Atari's putting out a thing that you can play like Steam games on.
I'm not sure because the details are not extensive yet. We know some vague ideas that it's supposed to play like classic Atari games and some PC titles, but they don't list any titles. Like, this thing's not going to be playing a Far Cry.
Well, but does it maybe have Steam Link built into it? Like, I heard that as a speculation at one point.
Oh, I hadn't heard that.
But, I mean, that was when it was wild speculation, because everyone was like, what is this thing going to even be? And to be clear, anyone who hasn't seen these pictures yet, go look at the pictures. It is not like the NES Classic. It is not something that looks like a shrunk down Atari. It looks like a new box that just happens to be in the Atari style. It has some wood paneling on it, but it doesn't look like an old, 2600 with the old dip switches and stuff on it.
We don't know much about it except it runs some kind of Linux, and it's supposed to come out. It's not supposed to come out until sometime next year. They're just taking pre-orders now.
Am I allowed to scroll down and look at the price yet?
Now let's talk about the price of this machine.
Mm-hmm. It's priced at $199. See, that's super high.
Right? That was my thought.
Hold on. It's $299 for the wood finish one, the collector's edition.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're charging $100. There's got to be something more than the wood finish. But it's only available on Indiegogo. I have so many questions.
Right? Like, I always want to believe the best out of stuff like this.
Hold on. I'm sorry. It supports 4K resolution? What the hell are you going to do with 4K resolution with an Atari?
Maybe it will run Far Cry. I don't know. What really struck me about this was that $100 disparity between the base machine and then the classic looking one with the wood paneling. Because to me, part of buying these kinds of consoles is the nostalgia factor. You spent 5 minutes talking about how just good it felt to click the little purple button and how the controller feels so good. That's not the games talking. That's your experience with that machine from your childhood.
Yeah, yeah.
Everybody who's going to buy one of these is going to want to get that wood panel finish. It looks really attractive.
Well, and I
does.
just clicked on the Indiegogo so I can look at the picture that's got the two of them next to each other, and literally the one without the wood paneling, it just looks like a cable box. Like, it doesn't look like anything. Like, why would you even manufacture that other than to charge people $100 more for the wood finish?
I mean, you know what? I'm going to disagree with you. It doesn't look like a cable box. It looks like an old cheap router.
Yeah, it does. Well, I mean, it looks a lot like the Steam Link, to be completely honest. The Steam Link, I mean, it's probably a little bit bigger because the Steam Link is like a hockey puck size. It just looks like I've got a Steam Link and a PS TV, which both are just these nondescript flat black boxes. In fact, next to each other, I can't tell the difference unless I look at them closely.
So I've read this Indiegogo, and it has some stuff that the thing's going to be able to. Like, it's supposed to be able to stream media, which I assume means like Netflix and Hulu and stuff. Basically, everything that your internet-ready TV can already do, this box can also do. As far as, like, what does it play? It says new and classic games. I don't know what that means.
I don't either. I have no idea. And that's been the confusion about this, like, since before it was even launched in Indiegogo. Like, people were talking about, oh, Atari's going to do this thing. What the hell is it? People are paying $300 for a thing. They don't know what it does yet. And there's $2.6 million already raised by this thing.
Very successful Indiegogo, for sure.
I mean, and I don't begrudge people who want to give to these things, but, like, I don't... Presumably, if this thing is a success, you're going to be able to just go out and buy it.
I would hope so.
Why is this thing 2,600... Now, that's funny, actually. It's 2,600% over its goal, which is kind of hilarious to me.
It makes you kind of wonder, like, did they already have the funding secured before they launched the Indiegogo? And they just, like, did that as a silly little joke? Like, yeah, we got 2,600% of what we asked for.
That's actually really funny. Well, I've seen this a lot. I've seen this a lot with Kickstarters, too. You see these Kickstarters that earn, like, 300% of their goal. Like, once something is funded, I'm probably not going to give it any money. And because one of two things happens. Either you're just paying for something that you don't know if you're ever going to get, or you're trying to get stretch goals, which stretch goals kill projects.
Yes.
Like, that has been proven time and time again. I mean, look at Mighty Number 9. You know, hell, look at Bloodstain to a certain extent. Like, it's probably going to come out and it's probably going to be amazing, but it has been delayed. And part of that is stretch goals. Is them adding stuff to the pot where they should have just said, no, if you give us more money than we need, we're just going to try to make the game better. We'll put it in the marketing, we'll put it in our pockets. Thank you very much.
One thing that makes me kind of wary about this machine, because we've seen this before. If you scroll down, it talks about an open and secure platform for endless possibility, all the games. Doesn't this just sound like the Ouya?
Oh, that was a thing, wasn't it?
Nobody even knows anymore.
Wasn't the Ouya basically just a glorified, like, Android phone that plugged into your TV?
It was. It had some exclusives, air quotes. But yeah, it ran an Android platform, so you could install whatever you wanted and play games and things, but it's like nobody wants a phone that plugs into your TV.
Right.
If that's the quality of new games that this Atari's gonna play, then I don't really see the point in it.
Yeah, I guess what bothers me about it is it's when it says new games, I don't know if it means will they have their own marketplace? Are they going to be is it something that you can load up like a PC? Like, can I go into Good Old Games and download something and put it on my Atari? Mm-hmm. Who knows?
There is a very robust homebrew community for these old consoles. People who still develop for the Atari 2600, the Commodore 64, all those old machines. Mm-hmm. If they tap into that market, I think it might be like a fun little novelty to own. But as much as I love those old games, like I don't want to hook a console up to my TV just to play some guy's new reimagining of Centipede. I just want to download Centipede and check it out on my computer.
Yeah, I mean, you get some pretty interesting stuff sometimes. Like, there's still pretty good NES games coming out. I mean, most of them are in the we're going to see how hard we can make this game category, which doesn't super appeal to me, but I do think that the technology people are putting into it is interesting.
Well, I wish their Indiegogo, it's already been successful. I hope they have the best of luck and that their machine finds its market, but $300 is kind of a steep ask.
I mean, if it comes out and it's worth $300, then I might get one, but I'm not putting my money into something sight unseen like this. I've been burned a few times already just by Kickstarter projects that I didn't put nearly this kind of cash into.
But it's funny that you mentioned that Bloodstain is kind of starting to like eat its own tail because of its stretch goals. Because one of the stretch goals for Bloodstained was that like the spin-off game Curse of the Moon, which just came out.
Yes, have you had a chance to play that one?
A very kind viewer on Twitter sent me a message asking he had a spare Switch code, asking if I'd want a Switch code. I told him I don't have a Switch, but I would happily take a Steam code. He said, "Oh, no problem." So he sent me a Steam code, and I played that game like 5 times in 3 days.
Oh, wow. I still haven't finished it, but only because my gaming time is so limited, and my Switch is like out of batteries, and I need to go charge it up, and I just haven't. So you've completed it. Have you tried all the different modes, or have you just run through it on normal several times?
I have completed every mode the game has.
Wow.
Yes.
So how much teeth does it have at its higher difficulties? Because it's not super hard on normal to the point that I'm at. I've run into Cheap Deathland, but that's about it.
So it has the casual mode, which doesn't have any knockback.
Right, I just skipped right past that. I was like, I'm going to go for veteran.
Right, because if you're not going to get knocked into a hole by a flying fish or whatever, what the hell is the point of playing a Castlevania-style game?
Yeah, I mean, I figured I could always go back and turn it back down if it turns out that it's actually Ninja Gaiden and there's 15,000 birds on screen at the same time, which it's... Most deaths I've thought I deserved, up until the point that I'm going to call pseudo quick beam area, because there's a part that's sort of, I think, near the end that has something that's akin to quick beams that I really am kind of hating. That's actually where I put the game down and haven't come back to it yet.
Okay, yeah, no, I know the screens that you're talking about, and I also died there quite a lot.
Yes.
I mean, you know that I don't like the old Castlevania games. I hate Castlevania 1 in particular.
Right.
But this game, what it does is the boss fights, they're Mega Man bosses. They're not Castlevania bosses.
No, they're pattern bosses and pretty forgiving for the most part.
And that makes a world of difference to me.
The way that the game works, where you get the 4 characters, it effectively gives you 4 health bars. The trick is keeping close eyes on your health bars to make sure you don't take a stupid death, because it kicks you out of the fight when you die. Which is a really interesting design decision, because if you died, pick a new character, then you would always have 4 life bars. But since you have to pay close attention, it's really easy to take a quick death and then get kicked out, and you've got 3 guys. And you're like, well, I always dive back in just so I can keep going after the pattern. But usually once you take that first death, your run's kind of done. At least for me. I think I beat a couple of bosses with less than 4 characters worth of health by the end.
Bloodstain was barely on my radar. Like, I was expecting this to be like another Mighty Number 9 debacle.
Yeah.
Like, Igarashi is just trying to sail on his Castlevania fame, even though he kind of didn't invent Castlevania or that style of game. But playing Curse of the Moon, Bloodstained has gone from like barely on my radar to like counting the days.
So I will caution you, because
Okay.
Curse of the Moon, from what I can understand, was developed by Intercreates.
It was. Yes.
I don't know that the Igarashi team had anything to do with it other than art assets and design doc stuff. I think that is Intercreates 8-bit magic at work. And I don't know how much that's going to reflect on the quality of the core game.
No, that's a very good point. And by all rights, I should still kind of be apprehensive about Bloodstained, because nothing's really changed. All that's happened is they met a stretch goal on their Kickstarter that they were able to hire a known good developer of this style of game to make that style of game.
Which, to their credit, if you're going to do a stretch goal, that's the way to do it. Say, we just got enough money to go tell these guys to do something. Not, we're going to add 15 more levels to our game, because that's where you run into problems.
And if the thing you tell those other guys to do happens to just be marketing magic to somebody like me, all the better. Because, again, I'm ready. I'm ready to drink some Bloodstained Kool-Aid when it comes out. I've watched some gameplay footage of it. I'm starting to follow it in the news. Wasn't even on my radar before.
It was on my radar, but still very much in the wait and see camp. And I'm still pretty much there, but this has definitely gotten my hype up a little bit more. I need to go back and finish. I keep wanting to call it Circle of the Moon because ha ha ha, it's like the Castlevania game. Which is kind of funny they picked that game to take the title from, because Circle of the Moon's not that great of a game. I hear it's a lot better if you play it now on emulator because you can actually see it.
I played it back in the day. I bought it. I played it on the Game Boy player for GameCube. I don't remember anything about it.
The thing I remember most about Circle of the Moon is it was like a Metroidvania style Castlevania, except your protagonist used a whip, and all your powers were changing the properties of the whip, which I thought was actually kind of interesting. The problem is they were based on random drops, and random drops are meh.
That was kind of the problem with most of that era of Castlevania, though.
They were very geared around, if you really wanted something, you had to grind for it. Now, I thought the Sorrow games were, the first Aria of Sorrow I thought was good because, generally speaking, the game threw good enough stuff at you that you were like, you have something that flies straight, you got something that flies like an axe, you've got something that goes down like holy water, like you're pretty much set for sub-weapons. It was the sequel, it was the DS one where they made it, and then if you keep getting it, it powers it up, and I'm like, no, that sucks.
That was exactly my reaction to those two games. We really enjoyed the first one. We enjoyed the Julius mode in the first one. Back before speedrunning was like a major thing, me and some IRC buddies were like speedrunning through Julius mode. I think we got it down to 13 minutes.
Wow.
At the time.
I'm very mad at myself because the Game Boy Advance and GameCube era was a period of my life where I was young. I had a job, but I wasn't earning a ton of money, so I actually did something I never did before or since, where I was trading in games at GameStop. So that particular console generation, GBA and GameCube, I have a very small collection because I traded away those Castlevania games. I traded away some decent GameCube games. I mean, I have some of the best ones. I mean, I still have Wind Waker, and I still have like Killer 7 and stuff like that.
But you regret trading the ones that you did.
Right, like I traded away Four Sword Adventure because it just didn't grab me. And now I'm kind of like, you know what? Now I actually think that would be fun when I have people, God, when we had people come over for Dragon Con, I bet I could have gotten a couple people to bring over Game Boy Advances and be like, come on, let's play Four Sword Adventures real quick. Because
yeah, probably.
None of us have ever done that probably with 4 people. I know, I didn't.
I no longer have like a PlayStation 1 collection for the same exact reason. There was a period of time GameCube was out. I wanted to buy GameCube games. I had a PS1 collection, and GameStop gave me $2 for each one. But with me, all I played through high school, through that entire generation until after the launch of the GameCube, I just played mediocre JRPGs. So I figure selling 30 C- JRPGs out of my life, probably not a big loss. Not exactly pining to go back to Legend of Legaia over here.
You say that, but I bet some of those are this game is rare to find now. Like my wife actually has most of the PS1 games that we own were from her collection, because I didn't really have a PS1. My brother had it, so I didn't buy a lot of games for it. She's the one who brought in Ark of the Lad and Lunar and the Final Fantasy collected discs and stuff into the relationship, and I'm like, those are some of our most valuable games now, actually.
I could not even tell you what games I own that are worth anything. I have no conception of that.
Honest to God, the most valuable thing, near as I can tell, that I have in my gaming collection isn't even a game. It is my damn GameCube component cables, which apparently go for $200 now because they're super rare.
Yeah, I could use a set of those, actually, when I go to stream GameCube games.
Nope, never gonna happen. Sorry, buddy. Not unless you got $200 to spare, and you're not getting mine.
There was a time where, the original Game Boy Color cartridge of Shantae would go for, 160, 170. And I got it for 20 when it was brand new.
That's awesome. I wanted to talk to you about something you've been playing quite a bit of, and I have not actually gotten a chance to play yet, and that's the Final Fantasy IV Free Enterprise hack.
Okay.
I haven't gotten a chance to play it, but I watch a lot of randomizer videos, and I get the feeling, and this may be early to call, I feel like this is maybe the best randomizer this side of original Legend of Zelda randomizer.
It has the same problem as every randomizer, except for Zelda 1, in that you're not going to be able to play this unless you already know the game really, really well. It's not newbie friendly.
So I can't tell if it's because I know Final Fantasy IV pretty well, or if it's because of the nature of the hack, but I feel like while that's true, it's a lower barrier to entry than like the Super Metroid hack, which requires some expert level actual move sets, or the Link to the Past one, which is so dense trying to get through it. I feel like part of that is toggles. Like I think it's got some pretty friendly toggles you can turn on and off. But you are right. You do need to know like the base game, at least in principle. You couldn't sit down and play it this way for the first time.
Right. That being said, like Final Fantasy IV is a very there's just not much to it. It's a very shallow game. There's not a lot to learn.
Yeah, and that's why the Zelda one works so well. Randomizers work better the less it's randomizing. I think one of the things that works so well is it gets kind of to the essence of the game, which is dealing with the party as it is handed to you rather than building a party, which you run into with Final Fantasy VI, which that randomizer is kind of a hot mess in my opinion, because
that one bored me to tears, because to me that just felt like, oh, I'm playing Final Fantasy VI and it's the same game except Terra's hair is a funny color and she has the dance command.
Right, and you can make it impossibly hard. Like I ran into a situation where I had a run that get completely borked because I rolled Berserker Sabin, and he didn't roll high enough strength to win the fight that he has to solo.
Oh yeah, I've read about that happening.
Yeah. And so I got to this point, and they may have tweaked it since then that you can like do that fight with the full party or something to make it more possible. But at the time, I just got to this point, and I was like, well, I can't win this fight. Sorry, not this run's just over, I guess. Because as far as I know, there's no way to change Sabin's stats before he just hops into your party, you know?
That's not going to happen to anybody in free enterprise. First of all, the documentation on the website itself where you generate your ROM is excellent. It tells you in great detail what every flag does. So if you're familiar with the game, you can make really good decisions about how much you want randomized. And then when you go into the game, inside the game itself, in the training room in the first town, all the NPCs tell you everything that's been changed in the randomizer. One good example is, in the story of Final Fantasy IV, you come out of the underworld, Sid has just blown himself up with a bomb, and he says, hey, fly back to Baron, my homeboys there are going to hook you up with a hook to pick up your hovercraft. If you go to Baron and talk to those guys, they say, oh, we don't put a hook on your hovercraft in this game. It's been randomized. You're going to get it after you leave the Tower of Babel, after having used the key in there. If you know the game, but you're not familiar with the randomizer, it does help prod you along to get acclimated to it. I still think it'll take a run or two for familiar players to kind of get into the groove of it.
Yeah, I just think that, like, one of the reasons I like the Final Fantasy IV randomizer, and in the same way that I like the Zelda one, is that it, like I said, it seems to capture the essence of the game. Like, I think the key to a good randomizer is changing enough to be interesting without changing too much. And I think that's my problem with some of these other randomizers like Link to the Past and whatnot, is that they shuffle the deck so much that you don't even really know what you're working with, or it's just boring.
The one criticism I could put on Free Enterprise, though, playing through it 6 or 7 times now myself and watching a lot of streams, is it's very easy for your runs to start looking the same.
Right.
You start out the game, you check the same few places every time, you get your party configured a specific way, you go to this one spot to do some power leveling, and then when you have the 2 items you need, you go complete the game. So the runs do start kind of becoming homogenized. Contrast with Zelda 1, where a Zelda 1 randomizer, everything is off the table every time you play it.
And that's one of the reasons why the Zelda 1 randomizer works so well, is you have that point of familiarity, which is the structure of the overworld, and then you shuffle it with all the entrances, because it's a game full of just, here's a cave entrance. You could maybe do an entrance shuffle with Final Fantasy IV, but then you just end up flying around a huge world map trying to remember, okay, which one of these caves actually took me to the Tower of Babel or what have you.
Right. Like, it really helps, especially given that the conceit of the randomizer is free enterprise. You have your airship. You really need that anchor of this cave is going to be this cave, and you know kind of what's inside of it already.
Yeah, I think that it works really well within the limitations of the game. I think that I have noticed on your streams that there's kind of has that one linchpin MacGuffin problem that some randomizers have. Like Link to the Past randomizer, I had a run completely die because I just could not find the Moon Pearl. And without the Moon Pearl, there wasn't a whole hell of a lot I could do in the Dark World, you know?
Yeah, you just can't finish the game.
Right, and I think that the crystal that you have to beat Zeramus. Zeramus? I don't know how you say his name.
I'm not bailing you out of that one.
I mean, I'm still torn on the Cecil question myself, to be honest. I've always been a Cecil man myself, and then the DS game comes out and it's Cecil, and I'm like, my world has been torn asunder.
I switched teams immediately. That first scene where Rosa said Cecil, I'm like, nope, I'm on Team Cecil now. No problem.
Did you just think that it sounded better, or was it one of those things where like you heard it and just accepted that was the truth of the world?
There's an episode of The Simpsons where you meet Sideshow Bob's brother, and his brother's name is Cecil. And through the whole episode, everybody calls him Cecil until the very, very end, when he's getting arrested. Chief Wiggum says, Cecil? I don't think so. Even as a kid, it's like, so the I knew that the voice actors recorded their parts separately, and they're just like reading the scripts, and nobody told whoever voices, I don't know, Hank Azaria, whoever it is who voices Chief Wiggum, this is how it's pronounced. So everybody went one way, and Chief Wiggum went the other way. And so when I played Final Fantasy IV DS, I'm like, I've been Chief Wiggum this whole time.
That's so funny. I don't remember that episode, and now I have to go track it down. And that's so perfectly in keeping with Chief Wiggum's character still.
You don't want to be Chief Wiggum.
Well, wait, hold on. Like the guy who voices Chief Wiggum, he voices so many other people. Did no one else say his name in that episode?
I have no idea.
Oh.
And maybe it was a stylistic choice. Maybe he did, and he's like, I'm going to say it's Cecil with his character, but Cecil with his character.
I mean, I guess the other people he voices probably weren't interacting with Sideshow Bob. Like he also voices like Apu and Burns and.
It actually is Hank Azaria. I just looked it up. So, like the chances of Hank Azaria not having any interaction with Sideshow Cecil is pretty low. So it must have been a purposeful addition to the episode.
Well, either way, you don't want to be Chief Wiggum. But yeah, I definitely need to try Final Fantasy Rando 4 randomizer and get that out of my system while it's still the new hottest. Though I'm hesitant to play it until they add a Spoonie flag, because that is the best idea that I have not implemented.
Oh, it's a great idea.
For those who weren't in his chat the other day, we decided, so you can get Edward, and Edward is terrible because he's Edward, but you can also get this item that's called the Spoon from Yang's wife, and it's the strongest weapon in the game no one can equip. You can only throw it. It's a spoon. They should change the flag so Edward can use it, and then you get this paradox, like this question, like if you get Edward, do you keep him in your party for the spoon?
Because the spoon is not going to show up in weapon shops. It is flagged as a key item in the game, which means It's randomized with the rest of the key items. So it's like, well, if you commit to Edward, well, now you're committing to way more treasure hunting to find that spoon. I think it would be an interesting decision. Yes.
Here's my question though: even if they made this change, even if they'd make the Spoonie Bard flag, which I mean it's just too perfect, but whatever. Even if they make the Spoonie Bard flag, is that worth keeping him? So if you get a 255 weapon with his abysmal strength, is that still an all nines hit every time you think, or is that? I
have no idea. I mean, we could test it. There's ROM hacking tools out there for Final Fantasy IV.
We may have to do the math. And the other question is, is there any way he survives hits? I mean, I guess adamant armor, like even he can wear that, right?
My standard procedure at the end of Final Fantasy IV is just to fight the last boss with 4 characters, because I never level up high enough for Rydia to survive that fight. Like, she just dies. So my thought is, find like 4 good characters, and then it really doesn't matter if you have Edward or not. If you have the spoon, that's great. If you don't, whatever, he can hide.
Well, I mean, by the end of the game, you can probably get enough cure potions or whatever to actually make that ability of his halfway decent. If you can just throw out elixirs or whatever. I forget how that ability works, though. Doesn't he default to your weakest thing first?
It only works with the weakest cure potions. It doesn't work with any other cure potion.
Oh, he doesn't... Oh, maybe I'm thinking of a different game. Maybe that's in the DS remake where he'll start throwing high potions out if that's like what you've got.
He might do that in the Advance and the Steam versions and stuff. I'm not sure.
The Advance version, he's actually not terrible, too. I mean, he's still bad, but he's interesting to use in in-game.
But there's no hope for Tella.
Yeah, I mean, even the GBA version, you can't use Tell at the end. He's just dead.
McClain, what category does our podcasts belong in?
You're going to have to give me some options.
Adding it to all the podcast platforms and things, I mean, it gives you, like, you got to pick 3 categories, like a primary, a secondary, and a tertiary. And as far as I can tell, all of the big platforms will pull the same information and index it the same way. So some of it is, like, really obvious. Like, there's one that says games and hobbies. Well, yeah, we're going to talk about a lot of video games.
Yeah.
There's another one, though, like, this is when I was wrestling with. We talked a lot about your infant son in the last episode. Like, does that make us a kids and family podcast?
I'm worried that that'll get us flagged for, like, people will think we're a kid-friendly podcast. And while we are trying to stay PG with our language, our topics are not always kid-friendly.
So then there's others that kind of overlap a lot. Like, there's one, we talked about some, like, news stuff, too. Like, news headlines that caught our eyes. And there is a news heading, but it's not just news. It's news and politics.
Ooh, and we are avoiding politics as much as possible.
Another one is government and organizations. And then a third one is society and culture. And I'm like, aren't these 3 things, like, all just the same thing? Really? Just,
I mean,
talking about what's going on?
Yeah, but I think that you have more of what you're focusing on. Like, I mean, I think I would think that the news podcast would be like your NPR headlines of the day. And I think your politics podcast would be your 538, let's analyze last night's primary elections. And then I think your society and culture, we might fit into that a little bit because we kind of touch on cultural stuff a little bit. Just, it's more of a general what the peoples are up to kind of thing.
What if you do a news podcast that's not about politics? Then you just can't index yourself under any of these categories.
I mean, I think you can just do news. I mean, I think if your headlines of the day, news, I see that as news and or politics. I would think. I don't know. Is there not just a 2 dudes have microphones and jabber about whatever strikes their fancy category? Because that's like 90% of podcasts.
Maybe that's implied in games and hobbies.
Oh yeah, fair enough. That is that genre to a T.
So what I ended up putting is I put games and hobbies as our primary. I figured that was fair to say.
Yeah.
I put society and culture as our secondary.
Okay.
For now. and for our third, I just put comedy because I think we're hilarious.
I mean, yeah, no, we're funny people.
People are going to comment, no, you're not as much as you think you are.
You just need to edit into like a long silence after that.
Right.
And then push the applause button. So I need a soundboard.
We need the applause soundboard right there, yeah.
Yeah, I should probably get like a cough button before I start worrying about stuff like that. Our super professional thing we've got going on there.
Right, super professional where my microphone is just sitting on my desk, so when I like bang it with my knee, everybody hears it.
I mean, that's Foley work right there. You're just spirited. I have a desk mic set up, but I actually have a mic stand because of my short-lived thought that I would learn how to play music well enough to do something with it. So I actually have the traditional mic stand, and I used to use it quite a bit back when the Rock Band was the thing. I actually got to where I could do pretty good on some things with the mic on a stand and then playing the little plastic instrument. I felt like such a cool guy doing that.
Yeah, the cool kids used to call that vox tarring.
Really?
Yeah, there was a term for it.
Like in the video games, like that's what they called it for Rock Band?
In the Guitar Hero and Rock Band community, yeah, you were vox tarring. If you were on the mic and the guitar at the same time, there was a word for it.
Vox tarring.
Yeah, there's a word for everything.
Well, I guess that makes sense. I don't know. I hear Voxtar, and it just makes me think it's some sort of like insult that we shouldn't be saying. Yeah, that's how I tried. I tried to play as much of Beatles Rock Band as possible while playing the instrument appropriate to the lead singer of that particular song. So whether it be the bass for McCartney songs or playing guitar for the John Lennon songs / George Harrison songs, because they both played guitar, a lot of them. I mean, I never tried to play the drums while doing Ringo songs, because who cares?
What happens, like, did you have to shell out a bunch of extra money to buy a zither peripheral?
Well, the sitar was a lot of plastic, let me tell you what. No, that was always my favorite thing on Guitar Hero, was when they'd have like a keyboard solo and they would just like track it on the guitar. So I always just called that Keytar Hero.
There you go. That's actually an option in Rock Band 3, because it launched with the little keyboard, but no songs used the keyboard. So it just had a feature where you could just map the guitar to the keyboard, so you had something to play.
Didn't they eventually put some piano songs on there? Like, couldn't you play like Ben Folds or Billy Joel or something with that keyboard peripheral?
There was a few. Like, I think there was an Elton John song on there. On the disc, you're talking, it had 70 songs, and there was maybe 12 that used the keyboard extensively.
I very briefly got into this game called Guitar Smith, I think it was, and Rocksmith, and it was it used this. It's actually a pretty neat peripheral. It was like a guitar jack on one end and a USB on the other end, so it would turn your guitar output, like a real guitar, it would turn your electric guitar output into some sort of signal that the PS3 or the computer could pick up, and it wasn't perfect. I mean, it was close enough, but you could actually play like real songs with it. And I was terrible at it, but it was pretty fun. Last time on that podcast what's the name of this show?
I don't remember. Cares? It's the Podcat. We renamed it earlier.
The Podcat. So last time on the Podcat, I very briefly touched on the man from Minneapolis claims he's from the future and prove it.
Okay. Yes, I remember this, and then I was going to read the news story, and then I promptly did not do that.
So I did read the news story, and it was one of those, like, sort of smart-ass web stories where somebody did a thing on YouTube, and they wrote about it, and it wasn't that interesting. Basically, one of these skeptic mystery type thing web shows interviewed this guy, and they scrambled his face and his voice for some reason, I guess because he feels like he's in danger, and he was taking a lie detector test. And I had several issues with this. First of all, the fact that lie detector tests are kind of bogus to begin with.
And by kind of bogus, you mean entirely actually bogus.
Right. Well, I was going to get to that.
Okay.
But second of all, this guy wasn't even administering a lie detector test in the way that you're supposed to administer it. Like, you're supposed to ask baseline questions to establish, ask them their name, ask them who the president is, ask them, is the sky black, is up, down, that kind of stuff, just to establish what's true and what's a lie. They just kind of jumped right in, like, are you from the future? And the guy says, yes. And then, like, on the screen, it just went, true. And I'm like, okay.
Well, that settles that.
And then, like, it just turned into an interview where they kind of just abandoned the lie detector conceit in the first place. So near as I can tell, either the video was bunk or this guy just believed his own stuff and blew the lie detector test. So my first question is, do you think you could beat a lie detector test?
First of all, let's establish that a lie detector test is not actually detecting lies.
It's not.
It's measuring physiological responses to various questions.
To be clear, we're talking about a polygraph. Because there are pseudoscientific lie detection, which is based on just watching people, too. I mean, you get a little bit of that if you look up lie detecting. But strictly speaking, a polygraph test, it's looking for, like, heart rate or sweating or breath changes.
Like rapid eye motions and things.
Yes. So apparently, first of all, if you just believe what you're saying is true, then nothing's going to change. So the main way to beat a lie detector is to be a sociopath, because then you just believe everything you're saying is true.
Yeah, do I believe I could beat a lie detector? I mean, I'd like to think so. Because I know, I think maybe there's like a reverse placebo in effect. Because I know the machine doesn't actually detect lies,
Mm-hmm.
I think I could just retain my composure and say, oh yes, I am Superman. I met Barack Obama at a pool hall once.
Yes. I'm from the future. That guy also said he was only from the year 2030, and I'm like, really? You're claiming we can develop time travel? He claimed we develop time travel in 10 years. If you're going to tell a lie, at least tell a big lie. We're not going to develop time travel in 10 years.
So this wasn't like a John Titor situation where, because that's what I thought it might be. John Titor was this creative writing exercise kind of thing where a guy wrote all this stuff about he came back from the future and then the internet had to pick it apart.
No, this was just a guy in a Minnesota Gophers like sweatshirt who I imagine got drunk at a frat party and decided to start telling this story. I don't know. True story. Like the article actually went into like the fact he was wearing these like University of Minnesota shirts, and like, is he from Minnesota in the future? Is this part of his like costume for coming back in time?
There must just not be that much to do in Minnesota.
I mean, that lines up with what I know about Minnesota. From what I can tell, it gets really, really cold. Though I think they have like progressive track record with a lot of stuff. So
I mean, time travelers have exceptionally good rights in Minnesota.
I guess so. Though he did have his voice and face disguise, so maybe he doesn't think he has rights as a time traveler. Maybe he's scared.
We could be oppressing time travelers from the future and not even know it.
Well, who was it? Was it Stephen Hawking? Somebody did a thing where they basically threw a party, but didn't tell anyone about it until a week after the party. He bought an advertisement, scheduled it to run, and it basically said, I will be having a party last week, and all time travelers are invited. And his argument was, if time travel exists, someone should show up to this party.
That I feel like I've heard this story from a couple different angles, like it's a stunt several people that have pulled off, but yes, Google confirms this was Professor Hawking.
It was Hawking. Yeah, okay,
Yes.
That's what I thought. Logically speaking, if reverse time travel ever exists, then you should know about it at all points in time.
Yes, now that was his point, obviously, throwing, hey, look, nobody showed up.
Right. And that's always been a thing. Like, no one can figure out how you would ever do reverse time travel. Now, forward time travel is always theoretically possible if you could ever figure out a way to break the speed of light or something. You got time dilation from space travel. Like, I was reading something basically saying that Luke and Leia in Star Wars logically would be, like, nowhere near the same age because something traveling through space.
There is an old time travel story that I haven't read it. I've been meaning to read it for years, but it's a short story called Enoch Soames, and it's about a man who travels forward in time. And I forget the actual years involved, but it was like from Victorian era England, and he traveled to something contemporary, like 2005, 2006 or so. And I became aware of this story because Teller of Penn and Teller was a big fan of this story.
Mm-hmm.
And he kind of did the same thing. He set up like this little party at the place where this guy supposedly time traveled to at about the same time. And he actually hired an actor to show up disoriented and confused, playing the part of Enoch Soames. And,
that's funny.
That's just perfect.
Oh man,
Haven't read the story. Have to go back and read the story.
That's funny. So, if time travel were possible, and you could try to travel to a different time period, and with, let's say, reasonable ground limits, like, just because you know iPhones exist, you can't go to the Stone Ages and invent the iPhone. Like, that's out. Within reasonable limits, when would you want to time travel to, if you could?
I wouldn't go backwards at all. Like,
well, okay, well,
if it's only backwards, then I don't want to go.
Okay, fair enough. No, that's a perfectly valid option because I was thinking, like, I lit nerd. I was a big fan of the modernist period, the Roaring '20s. Like, that seems like it'd be a pretty rad time to live through. But of course, you know what comes next, and And maybe, but would knowing what comes next, like, you couldn't stop World War II. That's outside of my reasonable scope. You know, you're not going to change history. But maybe if you know what comes next, do you just bunker down in Canada? You know, like, there's places you could go to avoid World War II. There wasn't a whole lot of action in South America as far as I remember.
You are putting way more thought into this than I ever would. It's simple for me. Any point in history that I could go back to that still has pervasive air conditioning is close enough to the current day that I feel like I can live those time periods just by talking to people who've lived through them.
Okay. I mean, I almost wrote down, like, that would be a perfectly valid option, because I don't know that I would go back to any time, because any time you could go back to is 10 to 15 years away from something awful happening.
Right. And for me, it's not, I don't care about anything awful happening to anybody in the world. Whatever war I have to witness, whatever travesty I have to live through, I need to be air conditioned at all times. And traveling back to 1920, I like the hats and the suits and the flapper girls, but they make movies. So.
Okay, let's turn this on its head then. Let's say you have a time machine, a forward traveling time machine, and they say, okay, we can send you to a point in the future, but it's a one-way trip. It's a one-stop shop. How far do you want to go? How far do you think would be cool without being, God, I hope there's still dry land to go to?
Am I able to use this machine repeatedly?
Let's start off with saying no.
Okay, so I step into the George Carlin phone booth, it's one jump, and then I step out, and whatever's there I have to deal with.
Right.
I'm not going. I'm staying right here.
Okay, you're playing this very safe. I think forward is so much scarier than backwards, because who knows? By the year 2100, we may have completely screwed the pooch, you know?
It doesn't even have to be anything we do. It can just be, oh, there's an asteroid we missed. And there's nothing now. You just step out of your phone booth and you're just floating in the vacuum of space.
Well, I mean, man, don't even get me started on relative position in space when it comes to time travel. That has always bothered the hell out of me.
We can do an entire 90-minute podcast special about that sometime. So, but if it's a machine that I can use repeatedly, like if I can come out and I don't like it, I can go back in. I would say 10 years. I'll come back in 10 years and I'll ask, have you figured out how to download my brain into a computer yet so I can live forever? No? Okay, put me back in. See you in 10 years. And I would repeat that process until the answer is yes, and then I'm going to get out.
And then are you going to immediately do the brain upload, or are you going to live for about 50 years and then do the brain upload?
No, absolutely do it immediately. Because why would I step out of my George Carlin phone booth time box and they say, yeah, we can make you live forever, download your brain. Like, I'm 35 right now. When I come back when I'm 70 and run the risk of getting hit by a bus when I'm 36? No.
You could get hit by a bus immediately stepping out of your little phone booth, which I like that this has turned into a phone booth. Okay, so you hit on a key point there, which was what is the technology that you would want in the future? You want brain in a jar, not brain in a jar, brain on a chip.
Immortality is the technology. That's because if once you have immortality, you can watch the rest of eternity play out, and you only check out when you're ready to go.
So you think brain downloads is going to happen before reverse aging? You think that there's no way we're going to figure out how to do gene modification? Because aging is a designed flaw, as far as I can tell. Your mitochondria eventually stop working properly by design.
I think both of these technologies are fascinating.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, don't make me choose. Whichever one crosses the line first, I'm okay with. Brain in a jar is better because you can back me up to a cloud. With reverse aging, like, yeah, now my body's not going to naturally die, but there's still a lot of buses out there.
Man, I cannot believe that you have not gotten into Doctor Who, because there's been like 8 Doctor Who plots that have gone through my head in this conversation, and they're all fantastic. Literally just the last season of Doctor Who, they deal with time dilation on a space station. There's a extremely long tubular space station that is orbiting a black hole that is causing time dilation, so that by the time you go from one end of the thing to the other, you are suddenly traveling about 50 times faster than the other end. So your friends on the other end of the space station are just 50 years older than you almost immediately. And then there's also a whole uploading your brain to the cloud thing that goes on. Oh, man.
That's definitely what I want. I want to be backed up in the cloud every 24 hours.
So let's say we back up your brain in the cloud.
Okay.
But you continue living.
Yeah.
Right? So let's say you're backed up in the cloud. And then if somebody puts that brain into a Brick Road bot, but you're still alive...
Okay.
Which one of you gets to be the real Brick Road?
This is one of those very interesting questions about like personal identity and thing. And it's been explored by, like, I could probably name 10 YouTubers off the top of my head that have all made videos on this exact issue. For me though, I don't think it matters because you can't put my brain into a Brick Road bot and have that be me. As soon as you flip the switch on that Brick Road bot and our experiences start to diverge, we are now two individuals. Like, you still have me, Brick Road Prime, but then you have like Brick Road Alpha or whatever over here. We have different experiences that are coloring. Like, one of us has calc.exe installed in his head, and also
that'd be so nice.
So I think that the second you do that, you have the same brain in two bodies. The second you flip the switch, you now have two separate entities, and I don't really think it's an issue that needs to be resolved.
All right, fair enough. No, I can't say I disagree with you because that's sort of the identical twins, conundrum. Like, you've got identical twins, same DNA, but they are obviously different people.
Yeah, and I have identical twins in my family who are just not much alike. So
I apparently have identical twins in my family, but they're back several generations, so I don't actually know them, which was terrifying when I found that out when we were having a kid. I was like, oh wait, twins run in our family? Oh God, why didn't anyone tell us?
Is that hereditary?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Twinning is definitely a hereditary thing. I'm not sure exactly how it's passed along, but they tend to run in families or not. So, yeah, just be aware of that if you ever decide to have kids.
I would like to reassure you. You have nothing to fear from the Brick Road bot. When it comes back, it comes in peace. It just wants to play video games.
I thought you were going to say I have nothing to fear about the Brick Road bot having twins, and I was going to have to ask a lot of follow-up questions.
When the Brick Road bot comes to visit, just take it out to the Witch. It'll be happy.
Oh, man. Oh, yeah. I don't want a brain in the jar if I can't taste Witch anymore. That's where I need an artificial tongue.
McClain, they recently canceled one of my favorite childhood TV shows. And I don't know if you've heard of it, but it was Roseanne. My family... Back in its heyday, we watched that show religiously. We loved every episode. We had that couch in our house. We sat on the Roseanne couch every week and watched Roseanne. And they canceled it. They canceled it this year.
Well, to be fair, they didn't cancel your Roseanne. They canceled a shambling, reanimated corpse of Roseanne.
I didn't like the reboot. I watched it. I didn't like the idea of the reboot. And I like it even less now that this whole fallout has happened. Like, oh, who knew that Roseanne was going to say terrible things on Twitter except everyone?
Except everyone who's had Twitter, like, for the last 10 years.
Are you familiar with Roseanne at all? Did you watch it back in its heyday?
It was one of those shows that I watched on occasion, but I was not a dedicated fan by any stretch.
Roseanne was one of the first pieces of media that I think I watched to completion and appreciated it on an artistic level. And I'm going to try to make this case. Partway through the series, the show, if for listeners who aren't aware, was about this middle-class family barely making ends meet, trying to deal with their butthead kids in this little small town in, I think, Indiana. One of the plot points about halfway through the series was that Roseanne, the mom character, who was played by a woman named Roseanne, like, she wanted to be a writer, but she could never pursue that dream because she had butthead kids and a big fat husband. And so all the characters on the show got together and they partitioned part of like a garage or a laundry room or something, and they set it up. This is mom's writing room. She can go in here and write, and when she's in here, nobody's allowed to bother her. And then they don't really mention that anymore. in the rest of the series. The last season of the show is notorious for being terrible. The family wins the lottery, so now they're millionaires, and every plot thread was just terrible from then on. Like, they did an episode where they're on Jerry Springer. They did an episode where John Goodman's character is cheating on Roseanne for no reason. But then the finale comes. The series finale. What used to be the series finale, I guess. The very last shot, all the family are sitting around the table, and Roseanne is talking in voiceover about the different characters. Like, in real life, my two daughters were with the other guys, not the guys they ended up with. And I thought they were more compatible, so in my book, I changed them around. And then, in real life, my sister is gay and my mom's not, but that wasn't as good for the book. And in real life, obviously, I lost my husband when he had his heart attack, and I didn't know how to cope, so I started writing about I'm like, oh my god, they brought back that plot point from 4 seasons ago, and they're telling this just really poignant and somber ending. And the very last shot of the show is she walks back out of her house, which has none of the renovations from being millionaires, and sits down on her couch with a bag of potato chips, and it fades to black, and that's the last.
And she's alone.
Yes.
Yeah. No. I did not watch it in its moment, which is a shame because I think it would have actually been really poignant for me if I had watched this live. But I wasn't a fan of the show, so I didn't watch it. But I've read about this, particularly in light of how jarring this reboot has been.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, I remember reading articles about how this show ended and how basically. And one thing that I never was clear on, and maybe you know this, was the last season always meant to be written as this thing just goes wacky and then we're going to hit you with this at the last minute? Or was it one of those things where the last season kind of went off the rails and then they wrote the final episode to kind of get out of it?
I don't know, but I also don't think it matters. What matters is it was something very unique and it was very special, at least to me.
It's kind of a unique spin on the "it was all a dream"
right
scenario, except they did it in a way that made sense because you're right, it was a callback to something that was established, like her desire to be a writer was established, and then you almost can think everything from that point on is fictionalized, or at least potentially fictionalized. It creates an unreliable narrator.
And that was exactly my read on what the show had done. But what I liked was, and after that was 1990, whatever, and all the cast members, Roseanne went crazy, and John Goodman went on to have a successful movie career, and Sarah Gilbert ended up on The View. But like, no matter what, like, the art still stood for itself. People all still talked about it. And now, like, that was the show's legacy. And now the show's legacy is gonna be this just ugly thing forever.
I hope that's not the case. I hope that people who fondly remember the show will remember it from that point. And so did you watch all of the new seasons?
No, I watched one episode with my wife, and even that one episode was too much for me. It was like, you've already destroyed what I loved about that ending.
Because I found the reason I knew a lot about this, and I'll have to find it later because I can't for the life of me remember where I saw it, but maybe it was a cracked article, but apparently they made a reference to that in the reboot in a way that makes the whole chronology make no sense whatsoever. John Goodman is his character, who first of all is alive again. They have him go into, they're like cleaning out some stuff, and he pulls out this manuscript, and she looks at it, and he's like, says something about, that's, I forget exactly what it was, but something like, oh, this should have done better. And she's like, yeah, I probably would have, except I killed off the most likable character. So the implication is it was a story within a story within a story. So 2018 racist Roseanne wrote the story about nice Roseanne, who wrote the story about John Goodman's character being alive, but she wrote the story about John Goodman's character dying. It folds in on itself in a way that is just insane.
Yeah, see, I don't remember. Maybe that wasn't in the first episode, or maybe I just had glazed over it, but
no, it wasn't in the first episode. It was like 4 or 5 episodes in.
Yeah. It part of me is just always going to be sad that that's happened now, because that's always going to be the footnote. Because, I mean, it's not just that the previous series finale is ruined. It's like, now like streaming services are flushing the show. It's going down the memory hole. Nope, that nobody wants to carry it. Nobody wants to be associated with this actress anymore.
I think that it's that they are flushing the old episodes. I think that now my hope is they're pulling them back because emotions are raw right now, and like with so many other things, in a few years they'll put the classic series back on Nick at Night or Netflix or whatever, and they'll just kind of forget that this ugly part of the history ever happened.
I mean, here's hoping.
Yeah, because I actually kind of would like to go back and rewatch it now, just to see what all the fuss was about.
I'll be honest, on the off chance that Roseanne listens to our podcast and then tweets something awful at me, I think I would really enjoy that.
Oh, I'll bring it, Roseanne. Bring it.